Hello everybody and welcome into my latest live video. Today it is Tuesday the 13th of December 2022. My name is Kerry Holzman and today I'm doing a review of the TP-Link, the AXE16000 router, which I have the box here in front of me and behind which the unit. What's interesting about this unit is it's shipped with all the antennas exactly in that position, which is, I thought, very strange. It's basically got a big piece of foam that sits on top with little cutouts for each antenna, and it literally ships just like that. Now, right out of the gate, let me tell you this. I'm not a big fan of simulations. I can run tests on this all day long. That does not mean it's going to have any impact whatsoever on what you should expect from this router. The same is true of any router, quite frankly, because the atmosphere, the environment in which you're running the router, the number of other networks that are wireless using up channels and bandwidth in your surrounding area, the devices you're connecting with, how old they are, as well as how many there are, will absolutely impact your experience with any router, regardless of any review you ever see. So at the end of the day, the only way you can really know if a router is going to be beneficial for you is to establish that the router has a specific feature that you need. But as far as range, as far as performance, as far as your overall satisfaction with the router, at the end of the day, no one can predict that. You're going to have to just make a purchase, and at that point, just try it and see if it works for you. Now, I recommend the purchasing from Amazon because returns are so much easier. So at least that way, you're not risking too much if you're purchasing. Make sure it's Amazon Prime, make sure that returns otherwise are accepted. Usually, Amazon gives you a full 30 days. During this time of year in December, they're considering the fact that you might be buying something as a gift for Christmas and therefore will extend 30 days beyond that. So you have until the end of January for most products purchased from Amazon. But do be sure and check those details. And these are the rules that apply in the Amazon USA. I can't speak for how it works in other countries. So we're going to take a quick look at this router. What I've done is I've been using this router for about 3 weeks. This is a $500 router, and believe it or not, that's a really good price because ASUS has a version of this router that's $700. So TP-Link tends to be one of these brands that can offer you something very equivalent that Netgear and ASUS are offering, but do it at a much better price point. I will say, as far as TP-Link's hardware goes, it's all very good. I don't care much for their interface, and we're going to get to that here in just a minute. Hello to all my friends out there in the chat. Thanks you guys so much for watching. I see Kevin Russell just became a supporter. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for supporting the channel here. Hello to Paul Garrett and PC Fishing and Rick Lakes and Mark Gaines, Gil Garcia and Tim Teal. Welcome in, guys, and Darren Gilholm. Good to see you guys today. Some people get a little confused that they think they're watching a live video when it's no longer live. I think YouTube needs to work on this. I've had some confusion from folks who say, I can't participate in the chat room when you're live. Well, you're probably not watching a live video. It's kind of tricky. So you got to pay attention to the date and the time that the video is posted. It's written under every video. It would be nice if YouTube had a little overlay on the text that says previously recorded or something, and I assume one day they'll get there. But in the meantime, if you see a comments section under the video, it's no longer live. That's how you know. So people saying, hey, I can't seem to join the chat room, but you see the chat room, but there is a comment section. The comment section does not exist on a live video. So if there is a comment section that allows you to leave a comment, even if there's no comments, but it allows you to leave a comment, you're not watching a live video. Right now, to enjoy and participate in our chat room, you must be a subscriber for at least 1 minute. I figure this, if I'm gonna get spam and bots and harassment, the least they can do is give me a subscription. I can at least get a subscriber out of that deal. I also will do some members only videos. Now the members only videos run one of two ways. Either the members get to see a video 24 hours before the rest of the public gets to see it, or there are members-only interactions that will only be for members. Now, all of the members-only videos are not seen by the public, so there is some other content I have. I'm just getting started with it, but it will grow, that if you're not a member, you will never see. I have to do that because I have to give the members something in exchange for them giving more than what average viewers are giving. So to show my appreciation to them and to give them something in exchange, they're doing more for me, I'm doing more for them. It's sort of like somebody might have a store, right? And people come in that store, but the only people leaving with merchandise are the people that are paying. Well, you only do things, you only give merchandise to people who pay. Yes, that's how that works. I'm not aware of any stores that you walk into and can just take whatever you want and leave. So, while I do still offer the vast majority of my videos for free for the world, it has unfortunately had the side effect of some harassment and spamming and bots that, just come with the territory. So in trying to get my core audience, my true loyal fans, the attention they so deserve, instead of competing in a crowded chat room to ask a question, the members-only videos are very small, very, very small as far as the number of viewers and the number of chat participants. So it's more like a classroom, like a real classroom in real life. So everybody can be seen and heard equally. And I know there's no spammers or bots or harassers because they'll never even know that video is there. So that's why that's done. Welcome to the internet. We're just steering around in the most elegant way possible so as not to alienate either supporters or regular viewers. But unfortunately, the harassers and the spammers and the bots fall under the category of regular viewer. It does not fall under the category of member ever. So just trying to make the most of both worlds, and that's the system we have in place to deal with the behavior of society as it is today, a portion of society. That's why it's that way. I didn't wake up one day and decide to do this. I've been trying to solve this particular problem for years, and this seems to be the best possible solution. Okay, so that's why that's there. Sarge Tech says, thank you, Carrie. I've fallen in love with my ASUS router. The range of the wireless has increased greatly. The web interface has many features. I also upgraded to the latest firmware. What ASUS router did you get, Sarge Tech? Jim KJ3N says, my internet speed is 100 meg up and down, and my NAS can't exceed 150 meg. These expensive routers aren't going to do anything for me. Your mileage may vary. Yeah, you know what? They're not doing anything for me either. Spoiler alert. This router is going back to Amazon. This one is especially disappointing because it ships from some other seller. It takes like a week to get it. And it's built up to be, the latest and greatest router you can buy, the most powerful, most feature-rich router you could buy. And yet I find it lacking in many, many ways. Look, it's not a bad router, but for the money, I don't find it to be a value whatsoever. You can get the TP-Link model that's below this one, that's just Wi-Fi 6, kind of looks the same with all the antennas up like this, but a different color scheme, for half this price, and probably won't notice any difference. That's why I say the simulations that people run in most YouTube videos, they're just not accurate to what your experience will actually be in reality. So, I could simulate cutting my arm. Let me rephrase. I could simulate cutting your arm. Okay, and then we can do it in real life, and you can tell me which one was more accurate in the representation of what to expect as far as pain and healing and consequences like scarring and infections and etc. The simulations really don't put the impact on what really can happen. So I'm not a fan whatsoever of simulations. You can simulate things all day long, but until you actually get the experience, especially when it comes to critical things like, piloting a plane or becoming a doctor or a lawyer, you will intern and you will practice next to an expert supervising you, demonstrating to you, correcting you for a period of time in which it's deemed that you're okay to work on your own. You just don't go from simulation to engineer or to a career. It's just not adequate. Now, when we talk about these routers, what I have learned about these high-end routers is they're really for people who have really high-end computer equipment. So for example, this router has two 10 gigabit internet ports, or ports. Now, I don't have 10 gigabit internet. I think I have 1 gig internet, maybe. Not even sure I have that. So this is a long way off before anybody in my neighborhood is going to need something like this, because the cable company doesn't offer it yet. They do offer it in other cities around Arizona and Phoenix, but not here and not in the vast majority of the county. So if you're leading the way, if you're somebody who does have fiber, 10 gig internet, and you want to make the most of it, well, you've already got a massive investment in your internet and your monthly bill. And most likely, if you have a multi-gig NAS, like all the Synology NASs I've ever seen are all just standard gigabit. That's all they are. So my NAS is 1 gig, and even though this has a 2.5 gig port, and as I mentioned, the 10 gig port, that doesn't help me at all. And even if it did have a 2.5 gig port, I would need a 2.5 gig NAS and a 2.5 gig network card in my computer. It doesn't help my wireless one bit. So that one computer, or those two computers that I've hardwired to 2.5 gig, if I had it, those would be the only ones that would see that advantage. So I could do that without the router. I could just buy a 2.5 gig switch, upgrade the computers, and accomplish the same thing essentially. Now, this router, as I mentioned, $499. Let's take a look at the Amazon page, because I want to show you what they're talking about as far as all the bells, whistles, and features, the marketing that TP-Link is using for this. And before I go there, looking at the chat room real quick, Richard Collins says hello. And Nick Poverman says he has a TP-Link router that was $50. It does what I need it to do. The expensive ones will do nothing for me either. I only get 300 megabits per second on a good day. Yeah, these aren't for everybody. So how do you know which ones to buy, right? So I'm going to let you know. If you think I'm just going to go get the expensive one so I don't have to worry about underbuying, you're wasting your money for most of you. This is a very niche product for a very small portion of the population. Sarge Tech's got the, that $25 router, that the ASUS router he mentioned, that was $24.99. He says it's working great for him. So there you go, right? So depending on what your needs are, that includes how many devices you are connecting, how old those devices are. Obviously, older devices don't run any faster with a faster router necessarily, unless you have a bunch of them and your older router just is having a difficult time juggling that many devices, or your range. You're not getting enough range where you have to put in Wi-Fi extenders, or you have dead zones in your house or apartment or condo, wherever you live. A modern router will usually fix those problems. Any pretty much modern router. With a router like this, you sort of reach this pinnacle of range. I wouldn't say I've got the best range out of this router. Right now I've got the ASUS ROG router in that gaming router. Right now that's the one I'm testing and streaming to you from. I'll have that installed for at least 2 weeks, and I'll let you know what I think. But so far, the signal on this cheaper, smaller router seems to extend further here in Studio B than this one did. So I don't know if it's positioning. I don't know what's going on there. However, that ASUS router is a $300, $250, $300. This is a $500 router, and it's not benefiting me whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. One of the things I don't like about this router, and I want to get to this first because I'm going to forget if I don't do it right now, is the way they've designed the Ethernet plugs. So I'm going to just come around here and I want to show you close up. Let me unplug the power cable from it for a moment, and let me take this Ethernet cable as an example. Okay, here we go. So on the back of the router, here's our ports. Take a good look at that. Nice close up. I don't like that TP-Link also puts some ports on the side. We've got one USB port, a reset, and a push-on, push-off power button. You've got lights on the top of the router, all 4 of these lights that sequentially light up at the same time to let you know what the status of your router is. Red, yellow, or blue. Yellow usually means it's booting, blue means everything's good and online, and red usually means it's got a problem, like your cable modem went off or something. But you see these ports right up here? These are your regular LAN ports right up there. And you see this ridge? Check this out. Here's a regular old everyday Ethernet cable. When I plug that in there, how am I supposed to get that cable out? What am I supposed to do? How do I get my finger in there to release the lever? I can't. It's not possible. I cannot release this cable now that I plugged it in. I have to go get a straight flat blade screwdriver and stick it into that crevice and push down. I just can't. I cannot get in there. What a terrible design. Why is this even here? Why does it extend out like that? That is absolutely the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Now, if they would have reversed these ports and had them pointing down and had the ones on the bottom pointing up, well, no, that wouldn't work because they'd interfere with each other. They'd either have them all pointing down or get rid of this ledge. On this level of router, with this kind of money, that's absolutely unacceptable. So you'll see it's got the 2 10-gig ports. It's got the this one here that's got the little blocker in it. It's just crazy, absolutely crazy. I would have absolutely no need for that for probably 5 or 6 years or longer before that technology will be affordable and available to me in my area. So which ASUS router was I using? The gaming router? It's the Rapture GT AX6000 is what I'm using right now. So I've got to get this little flat blade screwdriver out. And I've got to go up, find the little push tab, and I can finally get that out of there. Isn't that insane? Insane. What were they thinking? Okay. Now, let me go over to the Amazon website where I purchased this router with money from Super Chat contributions mostly, which is going to go back because it's a lot of money. When you add sales tax, it's about another $50 here in Phoenix for sales tax. So it's around $550. Let's see. Let me share the screen with you guys. Give me just a minute to set that up. That should work. Okay. So the TP-Link AXE16000, it is a quad band, not a tri-band, Wi-Fi 6E router. This is the Archer AXE300, which has dual 10 gigabit ports. It's a gaming router, like every router is a gaming router anyway. Supports a VPN client. Most routers over $100 support a VPN client. It has 2.5 gig WAN LAN port and 4 gigabit LAN ports. 4 is the standard, right? There's nothing special here. I'd like to see 6 or 8 at this price point. Now, we scroll down and we'll see what's marketing from TP-Link promoting about this. It says it's got an IF Design Award, an unprecedented 15.6 gigabits per second when you combine all the transmissions at the same time, which obviously you wouldn't do with one device. But just the idea that it can transmit to all those channels simultaneously at their maximum speed of each channel. You add all those speeds up and you get to a maximum of a throughput of 15.6 gigabits per second. Again, with the dual 10 gig ports, it's a 10 gigabit per second WAN LAN port and a 10 gigabit per second SFP Plus and RJ45 combo. The SFP port is the one that has a little plug in it. I've never seen that connector in my life. That's how advanced, futuristic, and ready it is for the years coming. Hopefully we'll all use those unless something replaces it. So that's a combo WAN LAN port. So you can use those both either or for your internet connection, which is your WAN, or your local area connection, which is your local network. It not only provides ultra high-speed internet access, but also open to the possibility of faster NAS transmissions over the LAN. I wish I had a 10 gigabit per second NAS. Holy cow. I don't even know what kind of hard drives I'd have to buy that could sustain that speed. I don't think they exist. It'll have to be SSD, I suppose. Then we got next-gen processing. It's armed with a powerful quad-core CPU, faster gaming, browsing, streaming, and downloading all at the same time. Okay, that's pretty much what every router over $200 or many over $100 will make the same claim. They don't even tell us what the speed of that processor is. It's got Wi-Fi 6E Unleashed. It's a brand new 6 gigahertz band that brings more bandwidth, faster speeds, and near zero latency. Great. So if you have a Wi-Fi 6E wireless adapter in your laptop or your computer, you can take advantage of the 6 gigahertz band. I guess. I don't have anything Wi-Fi 6E. I think you need to have that on like a modern cell phone has 6E, but I don't need those kind of speeds on my cell phone. And if you have it in your desktop, I think you need to have Windows 11. I don't think 6E works on Windows 10. At least it didn't. Maybe they've updated it, but I think Microsoft is using that as a bait to get you to switch up to Windows 11. So once again, after you spend all the money on the router, you can expect to maybe have to replace your computers, or at least a network card and an operating system potentially, to take advantage of that faster speed, assuming you'll notice it. Maximum coverage. It's got 8 antennas that provide maximized Wi-Fi coverage, whatever that means. Every router will say it provides maximized Wi-Fi coverage based on the number of antennas it has. So that's a whole lot of nothing. VPN server and client. The Archer AXE300 supports both VPN server and VPN client. Again, very common on a router over the $100 price point, nothing special there. TP-Link Home Shield. Okay, so routers like ASUS and Netgear in particular offer some kind of AI protection or internet protection that I find gets in the way. I don't like to use it. ASUS is free. Netgear charges for their Net Shield or whatever they call it. And now TP-Link has their Home Shield, which supposedly has cutting-edge network and IoT protection, such as network security scan, basic parental controls. Again, all of this stuff can be found on most routers over $100 price point. IoT device identification. I don't know why I need to protect anything on my IoT. That's really strange. I don't know why do I need to protect my Nest thermostat or my garage door opener or my Ring doorbell. Nobody's taking anything from it. So that's just weird to me. And again, if you have weak passwords, this doesn't help you at all. It says it works with internet service providers such as AT&T, Verizon, Xfinity, Spectrum. Well, it's a router. It works with every internet service provider. So once again, nothing unique about this router is being specified in those marketing details. So we go through these. This router has 4 SSIDs. Okay, so you have a 2.4 gigahertz network. You have the lower band at 5 gigahertz and the upper band at 5 gigahertz. Well, they're calling that 2 bands, but it's really just the low end of the 5 and the high end of the 5. And the idea being that if you've got a lot of 5 gigahertz devices wirelessly connecting, you split them up and sort of balance the load on that particular channel. And then you've got this new 6 gigahertz band. Now, I haven't seen anything with 6 gigahertz. I have no way to test it. So again, pay attention to these words, up to. Up to means you've got devices you're connecting that are capable of those speeds, and it's your router that's holding you back. Well, now the router won't hold you back anymore. It'll control up to 200 plus devices, as does most routers. It's just that they start slowing down after 40 or 60 in most cases. It says it's got a powerful CPU, but doesn't tell me what it is. Oh, wait a minute, here we go. State-of-the-art 2 gigahertz quad-core 64-bit CPU with 1 gig of RAM. Handles huge throughput to eliminate lag, enjoy fast connections, minimal latency, even under the heaviest transmission loads. You know that $130 Netgear router I've been preaching to you guys? It's a $230 router that you can buy returned from Amazon. Some customer bought it and returned it. They've got like 15 of them left in stock for $130. It has a quad-core 2.2 processor. It's Wi-Fi 6, not Wi-Fi 6E. That router's 2 years old. It's not literally a 2-year-old inventory, but it was introduced 2 years ago. You could buy it for $130 as a returned or used product from Amazon. This is a $500 router, and even its CPU is only 2 gigahertz. So it's not even as fast as that Netgear Nighthawk that I've been telling you guys you should buy one while they have returned ones available. It's a steal. You're going to get pretty much the same range that this gives you, the same speeds from all your connected devices, unless you have a device you're connecting to this that actually would take advantage of the 6E and the 6 gigahertz channel, or that you have 10 gigabit fiber internet. If you don't qualify for those things, there's no sense spending the extra money, because that's where the extra money is going in this. Of course, the VPN client and server support, that's pretty much standard. The Netgear Nighthawk will do that too. One mesh, that means you can connect the routers, similar or compatible routers together, so that you can seamlessly, just like your cell phone, when you're driving in your car and you're talking on the cell phone, you're changing cell towers without realizing it. So that's what a mesh network is. It effectively allows you to walk through a building where there are multiple routers to cover a very large area, and the routers automatically switch your connection. It has nothing to do with your device. The routers do this intelligently. So if you've got a house that's 6,000 square feet and 5 floors, you can put a router on every floor at every edge of the house for a total of, let's say, 12 routers or 10 routers, and mesh them all together so you have 100% coverage in the house, outside of the house, and you connect to one SSID, and you're just connected wherever you go in the house. Most people with a router of this power would not need more than one router, but you can mesh them as you can with the ASUS and Netgear routers, including that Netgear router I keep hammering home, where you can buy it returned. They list it as used, but it's a returned router. $130 while they're in inventory. It's a steal. They do take about a week to arrive. They're not shipping them overnight, but worth the wait. Okay, so this is the router here that we're looking at, right, at $499, and you got to get the list of all of the specs, the size, and I'm not seeing much in the way of review. Oh, there's a few reviews here. Yeah, at this price point, I would expect people to just be gushing with enthusiasm. But you see a lot of 4 stars, 3 stars. When you spend this kind of money, though, you don't want to say, I made a mistake and I shouldn't have bought it. You don't hear many people do that. They're going to justify their expense. Now, if we look at an equivalent router from ASUS, once again, it's not this one. Where is it? Let's go up here. Where did it go? See, a lot of these routers that have this look are very different price points because they're not all the same. Even though they look the same from the outside, they have the same design, more or less. It's a square box with 2 antennas coming off of each of the 4 sides. Doesn't necessarily mean they're equivalent routers. The price point is what gives it away. Like this $1,500 Netgear Orbi router, you don't even see any antennas. It covers up to 9,000 square feet. There are very few people have a space that large that they need to cover that much range. But there's a router for everybody's needs. That's why there's so many to choose from. And just buying the most expensive one is not the way to solve the problem. I mean, unless you just got money to burn. This is the ASUS router I was looking for that would be the competitor to this TP-Link router specifically. And now by comparison, the TP-Link seems like a bargain, doesn't it? So I would be no better off with this router than I am with this TP-Link router. So if I'm upset I spent $550 after tax, this is going to cost me about $760 after tax. And apart from a different interface, which is much nicer in my opinion, TP-Link's interface looks a little clunky, needs to be updated, looks a little aged. It's not a bad interface, but compared to ASUS and Netgear, I think the Netgear interface on that $130, the AX20, I'm going to keep talking to you about it because I can't believe they haven't sold out. The fact that you guys haven't taken advantage of the deal shocks me. But I click on the AX120. Again, this is Amazon in the USA only. I scroll down, look for the gray box, keep going down a little bit longer, and you'll see new and used from. And looks like they're right at 133.04. And it says acceptable condition. That just means you're not going to get the documentation necessarily or the original packing material. Yeah, but who cares? You throw all that stuff out anyway, don't you? If we add that to cart, I can usually see how many are left. Last I looked, there were still like 15 left. Where is it at? Let's go to my cart. Only 2 left. All right, finally, some folks are buying them. Hallelujah. So they're down to 2. Now, when these sell out, check in, especially after the holidays. Look for other people that return them. And you'll likely find much better prices than what it sells for new. That being said, it's still a good price brand new at $225. That's a really good deal. I spent $400 for mine 2 years ago, and it's what I've been using in Studio B. I'm not using it right now because I'm going through all these other routers to test them in real life to see what they're like to live with. But I'm pretty certain I'm going back to this when I'm done, because at the end of the day, I'm not seeing any advantage to these pricier 6E routers that would benefit me in my situation. That doesn't mean they wouldn't benefit you. They just don't benefit me. I'm getting, zero benefit other than draining my wallet. I'm not getting anything in return. And in many cases, it's worse because this has that 2.2 gigahertz CPU. So my data transfers back and forth to my attached USB drive that I'm using instead of a NAS are twice the speed. They're at like 80 megabytes per second instead of 40, 45, which I've been getting from these 6E routers because their processor isn't as fast. The processor has everything to do with that transfer speed if you're using the router as a NAS, as I am. Guess how I learned that? Trying to solve the problem I'm having would not have occurred in simulation for sure. These are real world experiences. Okay, so with that said, going back to the product page here for this router, I'm going to keep us on track here. Let's go back again, back one more time. Okay, so here's our AXE16000 router. That's what we have in front of us. Before I send it back to Amazon, I want to log into it, show you what the interface looks like, give you an idea what to expect. TP-Link's also got a smartphone app, which adds some features that the router does not have built into it. Shockingly, there is a reason to use that TP-Link app, which is fantastic. Other apps, like from ASUS, they just pretty much give you all the same bells and whistles as the router has right logging into the router from the router interface. TP-Link gives you features and options that the router doesn't have built into it. So if you never use the app, you miss out on some of the features that the TP-Link offers. Okay, let me go back to camera 1. And let me go back over to the chat and see what you guys are saying. Sarge Tech says, Carrie, that's a whole lot of nothing. Yeah, you must be referring to the marketing materials that were very generic, mostly. I'm just looking through your chat comments, and Sarge Tech saying a butter knife would work to release that internet cable, the Ethernet cable. Yeah, that would work. Your link in the show notes is the RX120, and I showed the RX70. Oh, did I? Let me go back and look at that again. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I do things so quickly and perhaps wasn't looking at the details, which is pretty important in this industry. let's go in here and we'll type in RAX120, because it is the RAX120 I'm referring to. That's a 12-stream router. The other one here, this is an 8-stream router. I see what I did. See, this is the 8-stream. That's the one I clicked on. I meant to click on this one, the RAX120, the third one down. If you use my link in the video notes below this video, I'll make a small commission from the sale, but it won't cost you any more, and it's anonymous. I don't know who's making the purchase. So again, at $229.99, this is the RAX120. This is the 12-stream. It covers up to 3,500 square feet. It says up to 30 devices, but you can have well more than 30 devices. It's just that the performance of the router, if you have let's say you have 40 devices connected and they're all communicating simultaneously, you're not going to get the highest performance to each of the devices. You will up to 30 devices. Beyond that, it starts to juggle and everybody has to take turns, but it's happening in milliseconds. You probably wouldn't even notice it. And most people aren't connecting more than 30, but if you did, you're fine. You can connect up to 254 devices, something like that. So that's just the network limitation. So here it says save with used and good at 151. Keep scrolling down just a little bit. New and used from 130 and 40 cents. That's better. There we go. And again, they say used, acceptable condition. I've never seen a scratch on a router returned. And even if it did have a scratch, I wouldn't care. Let me add that one to the cart and see how many of those are in stock. And once again, thank you for pointing that out. I thought, oh, the price went up $3, you know, but in fact, I was on the wrong router. There's an 8-stream version and a 12-stream, and the 12-stream, in my opinion, is better. 10 left in stock, so there's 10 of them. Yeah, but you just want to make sure you're looking at the RAX120. It's a 12-stream. Now, if they sell out, the 8-stream router is basically the same model. It's weird to me that they're charging a bit more for it, but using the attached storage as a NAS on the Netgear router, super easy. It's also pretty easy on the TP-Link, not so easy on the ASUS routers. For the most part, on the TP-Link routers and the Netgear routers, you simply plug a USB drive into the back of them, browse your network for the router, and you'll see your device, and you just click on it and you have access to all the files. When you use the ASUS router, you got to enable some permissions or disable permissions. Permissions are enabled by default, meaning you need a name and password. I don't want to set it up in my own personal network with it requiring a name and password. If I'm going to share it out in the cloud, that's a different story, but I'm not doing that for security reasons. So yeah, that's the router right there. There's 10 left in stock. Once again, thank you for pointing that out. These Netgear Nighthawks all look alike. They must have 6 or 7 different models that utilize this design, so pay close attention to those details and don't do what I just did and click the first one, because the first one isn't the one I wanted. I made a bad assumption there, which pretty much is an assumption in general. Not that the RAX70 is bad. Like I said, if the RAX120 is sold out and you absolutely have to have one, the RAX70 is also a good router. But I'd rather have 12 streams than 8. Andy wants to know if you can change the MTU setting on these routers to improve data to each device. You would do that on each device. In most cases, your MTU is going to be 1500. I've never seen anybody have a device ever in my life where they improve the data transmission speed by changing the default MTU of 1500. So I think if you run the MTU tests on each device, you'll find that the recommended MTU to achieve the fastest speed, if you run the test, will almost always certainly be 1500. But again, you can change the MTU on the router that will affect all the devices, or you change the MTU on the device itself. The MTU of 1500 is set by default on all routers, and it's done that way because that's the optimal setting in 98% of the cases. If you have a device that benefits from changing the MTU to anything other than 1500, please tell me what it is, because I've never seen such a device. Okay, So let me boot this up. I'll use this little computer here to log into it. So let me step around for a second and make sure I've got everything plugged in. We're going to grab my internet cable and we'll plug it in. I guess it can go, It can go here, here, or here. I'm going to plug it in here. It just auto detects. We've got our computer, which I'm going to hardwire in, and I'll just plug it into this port. It can go into any of these four or this one, maybe even this one. I think it said they're all dual WAN or LAN ports. And then on the side here, I'm going to turn the power button on. Oh, I still have to plug everything in, don't I? So let's get the power cable plugged in. Something else I don't like about this router is the power adapter itself. Let me reach over here so I can show you. This power adapter uses a standard PC style power cord, but it's very short. It's only about 3 feet. And when you plug it in, that looks like it's all the way in, but it isn't. So I'm trying to figure out why the router's not turning on, and then I look at this and I actually have to push it in a little harder, and then you can feel its seat. Okay, so now let me plug it in down here. Plug that one in, and then we'll plug in the mini PC on the desktop here. Get that plugged in. And I will turn the mini PC on first. Okay, let that boot. And now we're going to turn this router on. So when we turn on the router, we hit the power button here, and you'll see it lights up. And it's glowing in a yellow or an amber. That means it's booting. Now, a router of this caliber, the reason it's got a gig of RAM and a 2 gigahertz quad-core processor is it has its own little operating system installed. Same is true with the ASUS and the Netgear. These don't boot up as fast as those cheap routers that are relatively simple and basic by design. When this router has booted, those lights on top are going to turn blue or red. Red would indicate there's a problem, typically that it's not getting an internet signal from the cable we've plugged in from your modem. Whenever you change a router, you must unplug your modem and plug it back in again in order for the modem to reassign an IP address. So some people buy these routers, any new router, and when they plug it into their modem, the modem does not assign it an IP address, and then that person thinks, oh, something's wrong with my router. Always unplug your modem anytime you unplug your router. Just a good rule to follow. So you see we're still booting. It takes quite a while for this to boot up. It's nice to be able to glance over if you're having an internet connection problem and you don't know if it's your computer. If you just look over at the router and you see red lights, you know the problem's not in your house, but rather has to do with the modem or the ISP, your internet service provider's connection to the modem. So, see, it's red right now. That's not good. So we have a problem. It likely is because this router's, I've reset it. It's just like it's brand new out of the box, and it has not yet been configured. So therefore, it is not good to go. Blue means good to go. So I'm going to set that down here for a minute. What I would do if I saw red is I would then look over at the lights on my cable modem. You should know what the lights on your cable modem look like. Take a picture of it while it's working. Count the number of lights that are lit up. So if your connection to the internet suddenly dies, look over at your cable modem and see if it only has one light on. If that's the case, your ISP is doing maintenance or has disconnected you. Whether that's permanent or temporary, you need to call your ISP or reboot the cable modem at the very least and see if that helps. Anytime you reboot the cable modem, also reboot the router and vice versa. They should be turned on and turned off together for any reason. Just, it's a good practice to follow. It won't hurt you. Now, if I go to this computer right here, that's my HDMI input. Is that going to work? That does work. Okay, good. So now we're logged into that little B-Link router. And I want to go to full screen on my side so I can see. Okay, here we go. Looking at a first-time setup, we've got it hardwired. You definitely want to hardwire this or use the smartphone app to set your router up. I don't like using smartphone apps to set up routers. I have always set up routers the same way ever since the consumer router was invented. The same way still works, even if the manufacturer wants to promote using their smartphone app. It's your choice however you want to do it. So this is how I do it. I'm just going to click on the browser, and it should come up automatically with the router startup page. This is because we've never set the router up before. This is the only time it will automatically take you to the router. First thing we have to do is create a new password. And then we retype that password. Now what's interesting is TP-Link isn't allowing me to type in, this is my password. It says that's too weak, it says. We need to have something stronger. It has to contain at least 2 types of letters, numbers, or symbols. So to fix that, I'll say, this is my password. Don't use this password, okay? I'm just doing this to get through this quickly. Wants us to select our time zone. I'm Arizona. Next. Tell us which port you're using. I thought it auto-sensed that. I think it has auto-sensed it. Well, no, it hasn't. We're not using that one. We're not using that one. Well, I don't remember having to select this before. Which one did I plug it into? I'm either on the 10 or the 2.5. I'm definitely... I'm not in the 10 on the far left. I'm on one of the last 2. I plugged into the 10 that's closest to the middle of the router. And the one at the farther side is the 2.5. So I'm plugged into this one. Right over here. Next. It's this you can just click next on, and next. Here we can set up Smart Connect. Smart Connect just gives you one SSID and automatically switches your wireless device automatically from the 2.4 gigahertz band to the 5 gigahertz band, depending on any moment, whichever one is stronger or better or less crowded or faster. It's just smart. But some older wireless devices may not connect to your router because of this. So if you turn that off, you would then have to name all of your SSIDs. So we have an SSID on the 2.4. We have an SSID on the lower end of the 5 gigahertz channel. We have an SSID on the upper end of the 5 gigahertz channel. And we have an SSID for the 6 gigahertz channel. So you're going to have 4 SSIDs. And if you enable guest networks on these, you have another 4. For a total of up to 8 SSID channels. So for the sake of keeping things simple for the setup in this video, I'm just going to go with the defaults here and click next. Now you get a QR code that you can use, that you point your phone at, your phone camera, and your phone camera will automatically, well, wait a minute, take it back. This is the Tether app. And using the Tether app, it has a feature that if you want to share your Wi-Fi network, it'll pull up a QR code that you can show your guest, and they can point at it with their phone camera and automatically connect to your network or your guest network, whichever one you create for them to share. And they don't have to enter the SSID by typing it in. They do not have to enter the password. They just have to scan the QR code. Okay, it says keep your router updated, turn on auto update. Yes, we want to do that. 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. is fine. Next. And we're done. Okay, and the lights on the router are now blue. Now, they've noticed I'm plugging this router into another router. That's why I say on the last broadcast, modern routers are smart now and they can tell when they're plugged into another router. We don't have to do anything about all that. We're just going to say none of the above. There's really nothing we have to do. Now you can log into the router. Click next. We're all set. Click finish. Here's the interface to the router. It's kind of funky. They have a cloud service, right? So does ASUS and Netgear. If you want to have your files available to you when you're away, You don't have to pay for a cloud service. You can create your own. But you're poking a hole in your network when you do it. So it does make you a little vulnerable. Make sure that you enable all the security and have good, strong passwords, and it's fine. I prefer just not to poke a hole in my network, so I don't use that. If I want to share something, I'll use Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive. I much prefer let them deal with the security and the hacking attacks. Now, up here we have a couple of different options. We have our connection type. We have information about the router. We can turn the individual wireless radios on or off, including the guest network, which we currently have off for all 4 SSIDs here. And we have CPU load, memory usage, etc., etc. We go back up to the top here. We have information on our internet connection. We can clone a MAC address. That's all pretty standard stuff. Over here, we have our wireless settings. And once again, we can set guest network up over here if we want it. If we go to the network check, this scans for network security and network performance. And of course, we have parental controls, the quality of service, and more features here. Then we get to the good stuff. This is the advanced area where we have just everything from status, the TP-Link ID. The TP-Link does require you to create a TP-Link account to use the TP-Link app. More detailed wireless settings are in here, as well as the guest network. If you want to plug a device into USB, you can use a storage device, as I'm using, or you can plug in a printer to share a printer over a network. Any USB printer does not have to be a network printer or a wireless printer. If it was a wireless printer, you're kind of defeating the point anyway. But you could do it if you wanted to. And then how you're connecting, if you want a local FTP, internet FTP, or just Samba for Windows is what I use. You've got your network address translation along with port forwarding, port triggering, a universal plug and play, the demilitarized zone. So this is their home shield with security for firewall, access controls, IP and MAC filtering, and ALG, which is the application layer gateway. Again, I don't mess around with any of this stuff. Here's where you can put in your VPN client. So if you have NordVPN or private internet access or Surfshark or one of those, you can enable the VPN client, and you can add your OpenVPN source, which again, OpenVPN would what you would select for Surfshark and NordVPN, PIA, private internet access. They're all pretty much in here, and you have to go to their site, log in with your account, assuming you've got an account with them, download the configuration file from them, upload it here. That sets up the client. Then you go over to the server side of things, and you would set up OpenVPN in most cases and enable it usually under TCP. UDP can be faster, but it's trafficy. So here you could create your certificate, and under OpenVPN, where did I go? I don't want to do that yet. There should be an area where you log in with a name and a password that is given to you by your VPN provider, not your VPN login. It's a separate login specifically to set up the VPN within the router. IP version 6, which we don't need to delve into. The Smart Life Assistant, which enables you to connect to Alexa. I guess you can tell the router to do things like to update your firmware and stuff. It seems like a complete waste of time. Something called One Mesh, which enables you to connect multiple routers together. And as you walk through the house, the device itself will switch to whatever device is giving it the strongest signal, but you won't know what's happening. The routers take care of that transaction, just like your cell phone switching towers. And then under System, we have a bunch of features here. So the interface is it's text-based. You know, you don't see a lot of much of a graphical user interface like Netgear and ASUS are using. This is pretty neat with the LED controls. We can turn the LEDs off on the router. They're not very bright. I don't find them to be distracting, but if they were, I just click that and the lights go out. Or if I only want the lights to go out at a certain time, you can put it in night mode and you can tell at what time you want the lights off at. So if it's lighting up your room and you can't sleep, you can turn the LED off. And that's a nice feature. That's a really nice feature. But again, the LEDs they're not bright. I've seen some routers where the LEDs are so bright it lights up the whole room. Not so with this router. So that pretty much sets that up. Let me go back over to camera 1 here. So remember I told you the lights would be blue and everything was happy. So as soon as we set that router up initially, these lights went to blue. It's referring to these lights that are going to turn off when we say to turn off the LED. If my internet went down, the first thing I would do is look to see if these lights were red. If the lights are red, I know it's not likely on my side. Because my cable modem is always located next to my router, I just turn my head and look at the lights on my cable modem. If my cable modem has no lights on or only one light is on, I know something's wrong. And the very first thing I would do is unplug the cable modem and the router, or if you have an on-off switch, switch them off. Or if you've plugged them into a surge protector and you can just flip the off switch on the surge protector. Lots of different ways to accomplish that task. Turn it back on. Now, my cable modem takes twice as long to boot as this router. So the first time I reboot it, the router is going to be ready before the modem is. So I'm going to get red lights, and I'll know when the modem is ready when all the regular lights light back up. So in my case, there's 4 lights. You might have 3. That's why I say take a look at your modem to see what it looks like while it's working. Take a picture of it if you need to, so that you then know how to diagnose when your internet goes down, if it's something that you can fix or something you need to call the ISP for. 1 light or 0 lights on your modem typically indicate a problem with your ISP. And at that point, you would need to call the ISP. And more likely than not, they will tell you they're doing work, or an outage was reported, or maybe you're the first one to report it. So regardless of all that, there's nothing you can do except wait. Oh, with regards to the MTU, thought I saw that in there. Again, that's not something you should ever have to change. 1500 is always the default for everything all the time. So if we go back over, I imagine it would be under advanced and it would be under our LAN. That's the quick setup. Oh, under network, then under LAN. Oh, it has link aggregation. Link aggregation will take 2 ports and pair them together just like a hard drive RAID, except it doesn't make any clients, individual clients, faster. What link aggregation will do is enable more bandwidth across multiple devices. So let's say, for example, you're trying to copy a big file to or from your NAS, and somebody else is also trying to do that at the same time. In most cases, your bits per second, your bytes per second, your file transfer speed will be cut in half for each of you. By turning on link aggregation, both of you will get the full transfer speed as though you were doing it all by yourself without any competing traffic. Assuming your NAS also has link aggregation, then you're not impacted by other people's use of the NAS at the same time. So it doesn't make one connection faster. It only makes simultaneous connections appear as though there's only one connection in regards to performance. So in a way, yes, it's doubling. If you're normally getting 130 megabytes per second transferring to your NAS on a device, but then a second device is also transferring to or from the NAS, you'll each get around 60 megabytes per second. If the NAS has link aggregation and your router has link aggregation, you'll both continue to get the same 130. It is actually moving 260, so it does double, but one person doesn't get double. It's kind of confusing. You can imagine my shock when I was like, hey, where's my double speed at? So I had to do some research on that years ago, the very first time I played with it. And I was upset because I bought a special switch, because routers at that time that I'm aware of didn't have link aggregation. Consumer routers didn't. So I had to buy a switch that supported link aggregation. And the Synology supported link aggregation. I enabled it, and it made everything worse. Like, what's going on? So going here to the LAN, IGMP, no, that's IPTV. Our DHCP server. I've been messing around with so many of these routers. I might have confused this one with the ASUS one for the MTU. There's your lease time. Let's search MTU. Advanced network. Oh, it's under internet. Interesting. Okay. So advanced network, internet. Where is it? Maybe I have to change it to static. Yeah, so if I want to put all this information in by hand, then the option for changing the MTU size becomes available. But there's no reason anybody should have to do that. Leaving everything set to defaults will make your life so much less complicated and your experience much more reliable. So I don't recommend people change that. In most cases, if you're watching videos on YouTube telling you how to increase your network speed for free, and what they're doing is showing you how to evaluate adjusting what your MTU size should be, you'll almost always come to the conclusion of 1500. In fact, I would say 100% of the time. So I don't know who these videos are for. And you're already set there by default. So it's kind of a weird thing to show people how to adjust that, unless this is like 15 years ago. All right, let's see if you guys have any questions for me in the chat. I'm anxious to send this back to Amazon. I have until the end of January to send it back, but there's a lot I could buy for $500 on Amazon that I could use more than this. This also runs a bit warm. I'm accustomed to the temperature of a router, right? I've been working in this field for a long time. And as routers go, this run is one of the warmest running routers I've ever encountered. It's not hot by any means, but it's toasty. And that just stays toasty forever. It doesn't seem to ever cool down. But that's what happens when you want the bleeding edge of technology. It's pushing the limits. It's drawing a lot of heat in doing so. Paul Garrett says you could turn this router upside down and make a little coffee table out of it. Well, these antennas move around. They're not stiff. So if you turned it upside down, they'd probably just fold down on you and fall onto the ground. I know you're kidding, but I'm serious. I thought of it. I already thought of that earlier. Let's see. Nick Poverman says, imagine the real size of the circuit board underneath all this plastic. It's probably consuming, given that it's got ports. Oh, and there's some buttons on the front of this too. What do these buttons do? Oh, the one touch, the WPS button for setting up wireless devices by touching a button. You can turn the Wi-Fi on and off with a push of the button on the front of the router, and I can turn the LEDs off with the push of a button as well. So you don't have to go through the interface or the app. If you just want the LEDs off, you don't want to set it on a schedule, you just push it before you go to bed, and when you wake up, you can turn it back on or leave it off by pushing the button on the front. The problem with the Wi-Fi being able to be turned off on the front of the router is when people are cleaning and they pick the router up to test it, sometimes they pick it up and press against the button. This happens on a lot of routers where the buttons are, they're located in a place to be easy to reach, And in doing so, when picking up the router, a person can unknowingly press the button, not even realize they've done it. Suddenly it's like, my network is down, but my wired computers work, but my wireless computers don't see the router anymore. Something's wrong. Yeah, you hit the Wi-Fi button, or somebody did, typically when the router's getting moved for any reason at all. It's in the way of something you want to check, so you pick it up and you look at it, and you inadvertently hit that Wi-Fi button. You didn't even realize you did it. Unfortunately, I don't see any lights indicating status of, normally you have lights indicating what's plugged into your ports. There are no other lights on this router, so we're not getting much in the way of information. We're just getting status, right? So if a particular device is not working or is connecting at a slower speed, say 100 megabits per second, you normally, on a regular router, will get a different color light for each port. One color for gigabit, one color for 100 megabit, and then maybe no color, just the LEDs off if something's not plugged in. We don't even have a power light, none of that. So again, at this price point, it lacks a lot of visual information that you just have to log into the router and check these things out by adding more steps rather than just visually looking at it as you would with most routers. There's a reason why routers have all those lights across the front. Typically, it shows you your Wi-Fi status for your 2.4, your Wi-Fi status for your 5. Your internet status will typically have its own little light, which unfortunately looks like the rest of them. So unless you look closely, you'll see like a little globe. With this, that's all this is. It's like that little globe light on your router. And then you'll have LAN ports 1, 2, 3, 4. And typically there'll be a Wi-Fi light. If you don't have the 2.4 and 5, you have one light that says Wi-Fi. And that tells you if your Wi-Fi radio is on or off, and you override that by pushing the button, the light goes off. So when I push this Wi-Fi button, is my Wi-Fi on or off right now? I've pushed it so many times, I can't remember. I don't know how to tell, other than I suppose I could pull up my smartphone and look to see if my SSID for this is available. And if it isn't, push it again. I sure would like a light on the front of this. And again, for $500, I don't know why they didn't add a light. But the fact that we've got connectors on this side for the power switch, the USB, the fact it only has one USB, that Netgear Nighthawk I think has two. This ledge being in the way of disconnecting Ethernet cables plugged at the top. What I was saying was the circuit board is likely going right up against the edge of the plastic, because these connectors on this side, the connectors on this side, the buttons on this side are all connected to that circuit board. So I'm sure if we open this up, which I'm not going to do because I'm going to return it, but if we open this up, I imagine the circuit board inside is as big as the unit to fit in there, because otherwise those connectors wouldn't reach. And let me show you the buttons on the front, since I think I kind of moved past that when I was showing you the router. These are the buttons right here. So there's our WPS, there's our Wi-Fi on or off, and this last one is LED. There's no RGB in the sense that you can customize the colors or anything like that. TP-Link pretty much uses the same color scheme like on their mesh routers. They typically have an LED on top of each little mesh point. And so you can just look down at your mesh point, and if it's blue, you're good to go. If it's yellow or red, you have a problem. That helps diagnose any particular issues you may be having much faster, because we know the problem then is at the router versus at the computer. And that helps guide us to where our solution is. SargeTech says that I missed the firewall activation. I'm not activating any additional firewall services. A router by default is a firewall through using something called network address translation. All you need to do is plug a router in and turn it on, and you are behind a firewall. Now, if you want more advanced firewall configuration options, and I think there's a firewall service here, some network protection service, if you want to enable it and play with it, you certainly can. I never activate those services personally. It's just it's overkill. It's over the top, ridiculous in my opinion, and unnecessary for most people. So I'm not going to go through it here because I wouldn't use that myself. But Arnold wants to know if I'm connected to LAN or LAN to WAN. I'm connected LAN to WAN when I'm taking a cable out of my existing router from the LAN port and I'm plugging it into the WAN port of this router. And I'm doing that for two reasons. One, I don't want you to see my real IP address, right, for security. Two, I want to demonstrate what most people would do if they had two routers. This used to be a nightmare if they plugged a LAN port into a WAN port because you're getting double network address translation. What you would normally do with a second router is not use the WAN port. Go LAN to LAN, leave the WAN port alone, or in this case, when you're configuring the router, tell it to use, since 3 of these ports can be used as a WAN or a LAN, forget the WAN, let one router control DHCP and routing, and let the other router just be an access point. And in many cases, you can go into the router settings and you can still plug into the WAN port as long as you set it as an access point or a bridge. And what that does is it says, don't do network address translation on top of network address translation. Don't let this one issue IP addresses. Well, that one's issuing IP addresses. Everything gets convoluted. Modern routers today, you don't have to worry about that stuff. They auto-sense and auto-configure, and plugging a router into a router, WAN to LAN, LAN to WAN, doesn't matter. They sort it all out in most cases. With a router purchased within the last 3 or 4 years, they pretty much all do that, especially if we're looking at a $100 router and above. I can almost guarantee it. When you get to the cheaper routers, they're typically older models in most cases and may not have that feature. They might, but they might not. But pretty much anything $100 and above in the router world is going to get you really good range, really good security. Ideally, you're going to have beamforming. Beamforming is incredibly important for range, and the ability to change the router mode from an access point or a bridge to a mesh router. Most new routers also at the $100 price point and above offer the mesh option. That's not to say that there aren't sub $100 routers that don't offer it, or rather that do offer it. It depends on the router. It's just a good rule of thumb, just as a generic advice overall. If you're looking at a sub $100 router, it's important you look at those details before you make the purchase if it's important to you to have those things. Otherwise, if you're buying a $100 router or above, and you still want to verify it, but nearly 100% of the routers sold today at $100 or above are going to have the option of bridging access point or mesh. They may not have the USB port. A lot of the mesh routers that are sold as mesh routers, this is a regular router that can be used as a mesh. The mesh-only routers, many of which have 0 USB ports. So there's no way I could use my NAS, which is, again, just a laptop hard drive plugged in to the USB port on the router. It's so simple and so cheap. I can show you. Let me just grab let me find a USB drive I can plug in and demonstrate how cool this is. Let's see. Got a little Samsung T5 or T7. So in this case, I've got a external, like 2 terabyte. It's 1 or 2 terabytes. I can't remember. You know what? I can't use this one. This is USB Type-C. This router does not have a Type-C connector, so I can get an adapter, or I'll just get a different, let me find just a different drive here. No, I've got one. Here, we'll use this one. Now, normally, I use one of the Seagate trying to remember the name of those mechanical laptop external drives. There's the Western Digital Passport and the Seagate Elements. Whether it's mechanical or SSC doesn't matter. Okay, I'm not going to get any speed benefits off using SSD. It's just this is what I have laying around that I can grab quickly because I wasn't planning to show this. But I'm just going to plug this into side of the router here. Some routers will have 2 USB ports, which is great because that means you could use 2 drives if you want to, or you could plug in a printer and a drive. And now I don't have to buy a Synology NAS. Now I can share everything that I put on this drive to all the computers, wired or wireless, that are connected to my router, but the guest network will have no access to any files, folders, or printers. It'll be isolated, so the guest network only gets to the internet and they can't see my stuff. Now with that plugged in, I can browse my network. I should be able to. Let me see. It might take a minute for it to initialize. Oh, I can't do it on the streaming computer. Streaming computer's on an entirely different network. So once again, for security reasons, let me do this. Let's go back to, we'll go back to this little tiny computer I've got on the desktop here, the one that's physically plugged into this router. If we go to USB, we have a lot of different options we can use for a storage device. Now it recognizes I plugged in that little ADATA storage device. It's 1 terabyte in size. I click the share button. Actually, it's already selected. I don't have to do anything at all. So if I go to my desktop, let's see, I'll click on the yellow folder. I'll click on network. Network discovery is turned off. Please turn on network discovery in the network and sharing centers. So we'll just click network discovery, turn on. Oh, I see, I'm on a public. We'll change that to a private network with network discovery on. There's TP share. I click on TP share. Or not. Let me go back again. Let me just close this. I shouldn't need this anymore. TP share, is that taking me to it's taking me to a media libraries. Oh, that's the mini DLNA. So it's a little DLNA server, but I don't want to use it like that. I just want to, come on. That takes me to the router login there. It should show up in my network. That's the mini computer we're on right now. This can take a minute before it appears. This shows it as a media device, but we want to see it as a share. So I'm going to go to the name of this router, which is, I forgot already what the name of it is. Let's see. Now, once we set up the share, once we verify that it's working, we can then choose to map a network drive letter to it. So we can call it drive letter X, Y, or Z, and we don't have to go through this by just selecting map a network drive. We can browse for the drive, and we should see it here in our network, but again, I might have to reboot for the settings to take effect. But what was it? I thought it was called TP share, TP-share. Hold on, I don't want to do it this way yet. I want to verify what it is first. So / TP share, enter. There it is. Double click, and there is my attached storage. So if I wanted to, instead of doing that every time, just leave that drive hooked up to the router 24/7. It'll have power saving features where if you haven't used it in a couple hours, it might take a minute for it to respond. But I'm going to say map a network drive. I'm going to call it drive letter Z, and it's / TP share. That's all and /G, right? That was the name of the folder. Click finish. And now, check this out. Now when I go to my yellow folder down here, and under this PC, I have drive C and I have drive Z. I've put it at the opposite end of the alphabet in case I want to plug other drives into my computer. They're going to take the next available letter. So there's going to be D, E, F, G, H. It'll take a long time before I went into a drive letter conflict by getting all the way to Z. But you'll see I now have this drive letter. I double click it, and I can copy files to and from this drive that's in the router to all connected devices essentially on my network that can read and write to this drive, unless they're on my guest network. That's how easy that is to set up. And now I can save $1,000 by not buying a Synology NAS and 2 hard drives. Of course, I'm getting a lot more, right? I'd get a lot more storage at that price, and I'd get faster throughput at that price. However, for a simple solution for my needs, that's all I need, and that's how easy that is. And any router that you see that has a USB port on it, you can use it as USB storage that can be shared amongst all the devices on your network as though you had a little storage server. It's that easy. It's pretty darn cool if you ask me. And so that's how I've had my Netgear set up. That's how I had the ASUS set up. The ASUS router I'm using now, the, what did I say it was called? A Rapture GT AX6000 has my storage device attached to it. It just wasn't a plug and play like the TP-Link and Netgear are a plug and play. With ASUS, they're turning security on by default, even though I'm not sharing it over the cloud. I'm just sharing it within the building. So I have to manually go in and turn that off, which is an added step I don't have to do with TP-Link or Netgear. It's just that easy. So let me take a quick look in the chat and see if I've missed any questions. Feel free to ask a question now if you have one. I see Luke Greeny has joined us and Mark Carhart. Welcome in, guys. See Marvin Jameson's joining us. Welcome in, Marvin. Always good to see Marvin. Can you add a USB powered fan to keep it cool? There's no need to keep it cool. Its standard operating temperature is just a bit warmer. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing to cool. There's no problem to fix there. Nothing to see, move along. It'd be absolutely a waste of your time, money, and efforts to put a fan on it. Complete waste of time. David wants to know, did you get your card we sent you? I haven't been over to Studio A. If you sent that to Studio A in a couple of weeks, I will be there tomorrow. So I think I have about 2 weeks of mail waiting for me at Studio A. So no, I've not received any mail at Studio A for the last couple of weeks. Beard in the chat room says, I've had routers crash just by enabling USB storage like a week or two later. I have never experienced that with any router ever as a professional career IT technician supporting clients. Never once have I experienced that. But I also am not buying cheap routers. Right? I am buying, for my clients and the routers I'm supporting, they are all at least $100 or more. So if you have a sub $100 router, and you think it's going to perform like a $500 router, you've set yourself up with unrealistic expectations. Does it have dual 10 gigabit Ethernet ports? Oh, is it Gordon? Gordon, our good friend Gordon from PC World Magazine. Yes, it does. I can bring the Amazon page back up again if we go to my input here, Gordon. I'll right click, for me anyway. I got to go to full screen so I can see. Let's jump over to Amazon. And we'll just type in the search AXE16000. And on the connections here, this is the $500 TP-Link AXE300 model, which is AXE16000. At least they didn't make it confusing. If you take a look at the back of the router here, Gordon, you'll see we have the 10 gigabit port here with the SFP Plus combo, which has a little plastic plug in it for now. So these two are 10 gig, and then you have a 10 gig port here. So that's your dual 10 gig. This port and this port are 10. This one's 2.5, and you'll see they work as WAN or LAN. You configure them in the router. SFP Plus, I've never seen that connector, Gordon. I wish someday, when the community I live in decides to keep up with technology, maybe the infrastructure will be put in place. And then these 4 connectors here, which again, with this little plastic ridge, when you plug an Ethernet cable into these two, either of these two, the ridge gets in the way of releasing the little clip. I have to get a screwdriver or as mentioned in the chat room, a butter knife to squeeze in between this ridge and the top of the connector. And at this price point, unacceptable. And the interface, Gordon, it's kind of text-based by comparison to ASUS and Netgear. So this router was a complete waste of money for me. There's nothing this router is offering me that my Netgear AXE16000 wasn't already doing, and in many ways was doing it better. The data transfer speeds on my AXE160 Netgear, I was getting 80 megabytes per second wirelessly from my Dell XPS laptop, and on these other routers, I'm only doing 45 megabytes per second to my attached USB storage. And it appears to be because the AXE160 has a 2.2 gigahertz quad-core CPU, and all these new routers are 1.8 or 2 gigahertz quad-core, so they don't have the performance of the older, cheaper AXE160. So for me to meet my needs, I'm going back to my AXE160. And you can buy a returned AXE160. Somebody bought it and returned it to Amazon. Where is it? AXE160. So I paid $400 for this router a couple of years ago. You'll see they're $229 new, but if you scroll down, go past this little box right here, scroll down, and it says new and used from $130. Are you kidding me? That's an incredible price. They'll often say the small cosmetic imperfection. I've never seen anything that says that have a small cosmetic imperfection. Maybe they do and I'm not seeing them. And if my router had a scratch on it, I wouldn't care anyway to save $100. You may not get the quote unquote bonus materials, which are the instructions, the quick start guide, but you will get the router, you will get the power adapter, you will get an Ethernet cable. You may not get the original box or original packing. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. It may be that the original box is all damaged or whatever, but I throw all that stuff out in the trash anyway. So if I add this to the cart, the good news is there's more than one of them. Check this out. I go to the cart. It says there's still 4 left in stock for $130, Gordon. And if I had, of all the routers I've been testing, all these Wi-Fi 6E routers, none of them are doing anything for me that this router wasn't already doing. Range and distance are the same. When I plug a USB device into the back of that Netgear router, it's twice the speed. That Netgear router has a 2.2 gigahertz processor, quad core. All these new ones are just 1.8 or 2.0, and it's only $130 instead of $500, or, in the case of, ASUS's option here, that's equivalent to this TP-Link is the ASUS. If I go back one more, $700 for the ASUS version. So the TP-Link for what you're getting is a really good value compared to what ASUS is charging for their version of essentially the same thing. But they offer zero benefit for me. I don't have any Wi-Fi 6E devices, so I can't use the 6 gigahertz band, not yet. It's kind of a misnomer when they tell you you've got, tri-band when it's really just 2.4, and of course the lower end of 5 and the higher end of 5. 5 is still the same band. But they all do that. That's kind of an industry standard thing. And let me go back to camera 1. Now, links for everything that I'm talking about today from this router or that Netgear AX160 are in my video notes below the video. Gordon says, oh, nice, I have 10 gigabit Ethernet, so 10 gigabit in and SFP plus out. Rub it in, Gordon. Go ahead, just rub it in. There's a reason I don't broadcast at 4K. I barely have the bandwidth for 1080. And Cox Communications out here, they just obviously don't want to endure the expense of upgrading the infrastructure, but they'll have to sooner or later. Gordon says, I'm interested in the TP-Link for my 10 gigabit fiber. This will let me build out other clients at home on a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. So Gordon represents a very small fraction of enthusiast level computer owners. Well, it's not fair to call Gordon an enthusiast because he's a professional journalist in technology and has been so for, well, I think a couple of decades now, not to make him feel old. Gordon recently did a video with the folks at Intel on testing power supplies that's posted here on YouTube. And highly encourage you guys check it out over at PC World Magazine's website or YouTube channel. So the TP-Link interface, as I say, it looks a bit old. Their app on the phone is pretty cool, though. It'll do network optimization for you and check your network security for you all through the app on the phone, which are not features in the router's firmware, which is bizarre to me. Whereas ASUS's app pretty much covers everything you can do manually in the router through the web interface. So the TP-Link app, they have a Tether app and they have a Wi-Fi analyzer in the Google Play Store, in the Apple Store, and Wi-Fi toolkit. In their apps, TP-Link's apps for the phones are fantastic. They're stellar. But their interface on their routers, it's lagging behind in design and fluidity compared to ASUS and Netgear. And I'm not interested in Linksys. I really don't like their offerings, or Belkin. I did pick up one of these ASUS. These are pretty expensive, these mesh routers. And this is really stupid, in my opinion, what ASUS did here. If you buy this as a mesh kit, you get two fully functioning routers instead of just one router and then satellites, which is pretty much how it's always done. So ASUS is like, let's just throw two $500 routers in a box and knock $100 off the price. So you end up with two fully functioning routers at full price, pretty much, and no USB ports on this. So this does me no good. I cannot use my USB drive. I'd have to buy a NAS. The same is true with Ubiquiti's Alien router. It's the same thing, no USB port on it. So I don't know why at this price point, this is over $400 to just buy one. This is going back. This is a complete waste of money for me. So the router I'm currently broadcasting to you from is I'll show you, I'll just bring it up on Amazon here. This is the ASUS GT I have to keep looking at the box, AX6000. And then let me share my screen with you here. So this is the router I'm currently testing. I'll have this in place at least 2 weeks. I need to live with it for a while. Right now, in my experience and my needs, it's outperforming, for me. Range is better than the TP-Link, or what was the other one I was just using? Or the Wi-Fi, the Netgear Nighthawk 6E router, which is an upgrade from the AXE120, but it actually runs worse in my experience with regards to range and USB attached performance. So I said, okay, well, the reviews on this router here suggest, it's being marketed as a gaming router, and I don't need a gaming router, but any router you can label a gaming router if you want to go in and adjust your QoS settings manually. But you see it's got all those individual lights. The top light, you can adjust the RGB on it. It's smaller footprint. It gives me better range. And it's giving me much better speeds to my attached USB storage than the Wi-Fi 6E routers. But it's still not as fast USB speeds as the Netgear AX120. So once again, still 2.0 gigahertz on the CPU instead of the 2.2, and that is making a difference for me on my data transfers. It does have the 2.5 gig port, but I have no use for 2.5 gig. I don't have anything that would use it. So unfortunately, that's not a feature that's beneficial for me. I would agree the coverage on this router is stellar. Once again, I did not buy this router new. I scrolled down past that little gray box and I looked for new and used. So right now, let's see, it's selling for brand new for $330, and you can buy it returned. Look for Amazon Warehouse. If it's not coming from Amazon Warehouse, I ain't buying it. And Amazon Warehouse has them returned at $236. They have another one here at $275, $275. These are all Amazon Warehouse. You could also just click the Amazon Warehouse link and just search Amazon Warehouse. You can also use the drop down here for products you're looking for, like router. And we can see all the different routers that are available from Amazon's warehouse. The reason I'm buying from Amazon Warehouse strictly is I know returns are easy and painless. I can return the router or anything else I'm buying from Amazon Warehouse with no problems, no cost. And all the returns here in the USA for purchases made in December, you have until the end of January to return them. So if you want to give them as gifts or you want some time to live with it for a little while, the router that I'm using, that 6000 GT router, again, that'll say that it's got, small imperfection across the front or back of the item. It's like brand new. Clearly, when I took it out of the package, you could tell it was repackaged. You could tell this router had been out of the box, but I don't see a mark or a scratch on it. It also had the latest firmware already on it, which I don't know if they did that or if that's just coincidence. And yeah, it's performing really, really well for me so far. And I've only had it in place for a day, but or 2 days. But we're off to a really good start with this router. However, it's still more expensive than that AX120, and if I couldn't get an AX120, this would be my second choice, and I would definitely buy a used one, a returned one, as long as it came from Amazon Warehouse and there was a significant price savings, which, that's nearly $100 off. It's a great little savings tip to know if you're shopping at Amazon here in the USA. Let me go back over to the chat room here. Bird in the chat room says SFP Plus is used for AT&T fiber. Yeah, I wish that was an option for me. And it's definitely adding to the overall cost of that router, the fact that it has that port. So it doesn't make any sense for you to spend the extra $100 or whatever it is, specifically because it has that feature, when you don't have any use for that feature. You just wasted your money. So bear that in mind when you're buying a router. You might be paying for things you can't use. And it could be a long, long time before fiber is offered, at least in my area. It could be 10 years or more for all I know. Old Man 55 says, are there USB to RJ45 adapters? Yeah, you can buy little hard drive docks, if that's what you're talking about, that are essentially little external NAS devices. But again, why spend the extra money if it's already built into the router? Furthermore, that ASUS router only has the standard 4 network jacks because its emphasis is on wireless. And I need the 4 I have. I don't have room to add a 5th one. Then I'd have to buy a network switch. I'd have to buy a bigger surge protector because I'm using all the plugs on my surge protector. The cables are going to be even more of a nightmare. There's one more thing to power off and power on when things go wrong. It's one more point of failure. And it's so much easier to just buy a router that's got the USB port, plug it in, be done with it. You have fewer points of failure and less overall expense. That's the way I see it. James Casey wants to know what I think of Ubiquiti routers. In an enterprise environment, if I had a corporation or a small business that I was, they were looking for, let's say, something that can tie into their security cameras, and they want little access points that look like smoke detectors installed around the building because it's, let's say, a larger building. Ubiquiti is a common choice for that environment. Generally, the people I know that use Ubiquiti stuff in their homes are people that do high-end networking stuff for a living. So I am not a fan of Ubiquiti for consumers. It's over the top and ridiculous, and I think well overpriced. But the Ubiquiti fans tend to be like, you know, AMD fans versus Intel. There's some fanboyishness going on there with Ubiquiti. But I will say, in the right environment, Ubiquiti, like the Dream Machine router, tied in with their camera system, tied in with these little smoke detector looking access points, which are just, people don't even notice them, and they're up into the ceiling, they're out of the way. They make a lot of sense for businesses. But for the consumer, I don't recommend them. Unless, of course, that consumer works in the industry and they want that level of granularity that you can get with Ubiquiti. Same with like a pfSense router. I mean, I don't want to go through all those configuration settings. That's a nightmare to me. Some people think it's fun. I don't find that fun. Just buy a nice router, a consumer router, if you're using it in your house, and be done with it. You know, this idea that I want to have control over every little detail makes diagnosing your issues your problem. Right? Why doesn't this web page load? Well, because you created your own little DNS server that blocks ads, and you've put that into your pfSense router, and you've got all these 300 settings. Good luck to you. Enjoy that. It's not for me. And nor would I want to support that, because I could go out of business every time a customer called me with a problem and said, hey, this should be under warranty. You set it up and it ain't working. So just get something like this, and at the end of the day, it's about the same price. Like if you buy a pfSense appliance, you're looking at $200 to $500 just for the appliance. Of course, the pfSense software is free, and if you want to learn more about this level of stuff, please go check out Network Chuck. Network Chuck has a wonderful YouTube channel, 2.7 million subscribers, and he'll get into that super geeky, nerdy networking stuff. That's over the top, way overkill for home users. And his attitude is, you should do this so you have the experience and because it's fun. I disagree. I absolutely disagree, unless you have a lot of time on your hands or you're in the field and you want to stay sharp. Other than that, for regular, ordinary users, this is who my channel is for. Regular folks, if you want to get into that advanced stuff, I recommend Network Chuck. I'm just looking through to see if there's other questions in the chat. If you do have a question, please ask it now. Otherwise, we're about ready to wrap up today's video. I've been live now for, it's been about an hour and 45 minutes. I like to keep these around 2 hours. I still have a lot more content to make. So I'm trying to separate the content out in pieces. So if I review, let's say 3 routers in one video, 6 months from now, when somebody asks me where that review is, I have a hard time finding it. So if I do a separate video for each thing I'm testing, it's much easier and faster to find that resource, that video, in a search than it is when I combine a bunch of stuff in one video. And that's why I'm intentionally and purposefully separating these out. John Doe wants to know, to get a good signal in a garage that's 400 feet from the house, would you mesh, would you use a booster, or simply upgrade the router and hope it works? I would upgrade the router. In most cases, mesh points are only needed when you're trying to cover multiple floors or a distance of greater than 3,000 feet. 400 feet's nothing. You can relocate the router so it's more in the middle of your house versus at one end or the other. I do not recommend Wi-Fi extenders. They are a complete waste of time and money, in my opinion. They're going to take your signal, the Wi-Fi extender is going to get a weaker than 5 bar signal, right? Because you're going to put it somewhere further from your router. It may only have 2 or 3 bars. And then it's going to rebroadcast its own signal to the devices you want to connect to. So even though those devices are connecting to your Wi-Fi extender at 5 bars, the Wi-Fi extender is only connecting to the router at 2 or 3. And whichever one of those is the slowest determines the entire speed of that transaction. And because of the design of Wi-Fi extenders being flawed, in my opinion, they're overlapping half of your signal on top of your router's signal because it broadcasts in all directions. So the receiving signal gets overlapped, which is really stupid. Much better, in my opinion, to get yourself a much nicer router. So what router do you have now? I would, from what you're describing, if you can't go 400 feet into your garage, it sounds like your router's more than 5 or 6 years old. I would buy that TP-Link. I would buy that AXE120. I have seen people spend $30 for this and $40 for that, and then they keep spending nickel and diming a little bit, thinking they're outsmarting having to pay for a new router with all that cost, and they spend way more, and they end up having multiple points of failure that they have to check anytime there's an issue. You have more things that can go wrong, more things that need firmware updates and maintenance. I'm a big fan of keep it super simple, the KISS method, and just get yourself that AXE120 at $130, the used one. It will always have the power cable. It wouldn't do you any good to sell you a router that doesn't come with a power cable. So yes, they always come with the power cable. They also throw in a little Ethernet cable, patch cable, which I never use. And for $130, your problem will likely be solved, and you'll have a higher performance router, and Wi-Fi 6 at that. Samuel Kowalski wants to know when Wi-Fi 7 is supposed to be out. The first quarter of next year, so sometime between January and April of 2023. But again, I don't have anything Wi-Fi 7 on the opposite side to connect to it, any more than I have anything Wi-Fi 6E other than my Galaxy S22. Why do I need 6E on my phone? I have no idea why I would need that. So I also think you would need not only a Wi-Fi 6E adapter in your computer, but you'd also have to be running Windows 11. I don't believe Windows 10 supports Wi-Fi 6E. So I don't know what all the anxiousness is with with Wi-Fi 7. If Wi-Fi 6E isn't doing anything to help me, Wi-Fi 7 isn't going to do anything to help me. TP-Link has some really cool Wi-Fi 7 routers coming out. And I got to tell you, I just want one because they look really, really cool. I'm so done with this spider design that everybody's been utilizing lately. Just be done with it. And I'm happy to say TP-Link's new routers that are Wi-Fi 7 are completely redesigned, and they look fantastic. So if we go, for example, over to, let me go over to YouTube, and I'll type in Wi-Fi 7 in the search. Actually, we'll go to TP-Link's website. And let me share the screen with you guys. So they're just basically saying the first quarter of next year. They haven't really put a solid date as far as I know. And take a look at the routers here. Let's just scroll down. Scroll, 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 scroll. Products, here we go. Check this out. The this BE900 is so cool. It's got like an LED interface on the front of it that can show you your bandwidth and ties in with Alexa. This looks like the Imperial Shuttle, their gaming router. The BE19000 is just a really cool design. And again, if we go back and look at this flagship model here, these LEDs can change, show the date and time, and you can even put your little logo on there if you want. It's just a really cool looking router. I'm so glad to get away from that spider-like design. I'm just hopeful that they're going to improve their interface, modernize it a bit more. But that's the only reason I want it, is for how it looks. I won't be able to take advantage of any of the Wi-Fi 7 features any more than I can take advantage of any of the Wi-Fi 6E features for my needs. Your needs obviously would be different than mine, but I'm very much looking forward to these routers when they come out. I'm excited to see a change in the overall design and footprint of these routers, and I'm happy to see TP-Link leading the way with that as well, of all people. Looks like I had a little weird connection issue there. It's been doing this to me on my broadcasts. I think it's telling me to go. Okay, any last questions? I'd be happy to address them, or we'll wrap it up. Carrie, have I used TP-Link Omada stuff? I don't even know what Omada is. Let me Google that. TP-Link Omada. Oh, no. Once again, you want to watch Network Chuck for that level of stuff. I'm not doing. I'm trying to keep my channel to appeal to average, ordinary computer owners. I don't want to alienate them or make them any more intimidated than they already are. But there are other channels if you want to get it to that level of granular technical information. Again, Network Chuck is a great source for that level, but it does not apply to the average, ordinary computer user. Again, my goal here is to remove the fear and intimidation from that ordinary computer users in general almost ubiquitously have. So that's my target audience. And so when I draw in an audience that's more technically capable and they want me to answer these more technical questions, sometimes I feel like they're testing me. Does he really know anything? But in answering these really technical questions, I'm alienating that vast majority of audience that I'm targeting. So I don't want to alienate the technical users either, but I do want to set realistic expectations of the kind of content that you can expect from me. Trying to demonstrate things that would benefit most people and set their expectations reasonably without overwhelming them with so much information they can't remember any details of what I said. I'm not trying to train anybody for certification. Network Chuck does. I'm not trying to train people to become technicians, but if I have inspired you to pursue that, wonderful. But you'll have to pursue that elsewhere. We're trying to keep everything simple here as much as possible and as it pertains to the vast majority of computer owners, right? Just try to get people to encourage them to be a little more brave and a little more fearless when it comes to taking back control of their computer and using their computer for more than just what they're using it for, because they're afraid of breaking it, so they just do this or that. So that's why I do what I do the way I do it, and I like to think that my YouTube channel is unique that way. Flipper Fop mentions the PowerCert animated videos. Again, those were the 3 channels I was recommending on yesterday's video, which is PowerCert animated videos, the Network Chuck, and IT Pro TV. Those are more of your... So PowerCert animated videos are great for the very basic introduction to this more granular level of controller understanding, what a router does, what a switch does, what a VLAN is, etc. That's your very basic entry-level information. Network Chuck demonstrates how to use it. And then, of course, IT Pro TV, they sell courses to get you through exams and certifications, as well as they have a number of free videos on their YouTube channel as well. But for those people at that level, don't expect that level from here. This isn't the channel for advanced technicians, other than watching it, I suppose, for entertainment or to police me, which a lot of people seem to like to do. But I will tell you that the vast majority of computer owners are overlooked on YouTube by the enthusiasts and by a lot of the channels. They don't speak the common language. They're talking geek, and it's just like speaking another language to regular folks who own a computer. They don't understand the word router or switch. They think of a switch, a physical on-off switch. And there's no way we can force anybody to learn it. They have to want to learn it. So my goal here is to encourage them if they're leaning in that direction, or if they stumble on my channel and they weren't leaning in that direction, but after seeing how easy I show what it does and what it can do, that inspires them to try it themselves, which with that success encourages them to keep moving forward. Once they move forward beyond a certain point, they've outgrown me, but there's lots of other people just starting, right? But those people can then move on to other more advanced channels if that's what direction it takes them. That's wonderful. Michael in the chat wants to know if I use or recommend Winget. Winget. What the heck is Winget? I don't even know what that is. Oh, it's a package manager? I don't use package managers. No. There was another one everybody kept recommending to me. I can't remember the name of it. Once again, we're still talking about IT level tools that a normal, average, ordinary computer owner would have absolutely no benefit from. So once again, this is not the channel for that type of information, but there are plenty of other channels where they can go through that type of stuff that applies to a very niche type of crowd. Andy Kane says, you inspired me to do my A+, so thank you. Hey, right on. That's really cool. Congrats on getting your A+. I would normally recommend TP-Link routers. We gave away 10 TP-Link routers just a few months ago, all in part because of a contribution from our good friend Peter Laycock, who watches us in Scotland. And I was able to get those routers for $50 a piece. I was originally going to give away new ones, and they were like $70 a piece. Or was it $60? But then they had a bunch of refurbished or renewed ones, which is another thing you can look for on Amazon, which is different from a used item. They have renewed items. And the renewed items, they'll come in a plain box, no manufacturer's advertising on it. And you get the router, power cable, instructions, typically a 90-day warranty. So those were $50, and I was able to, instead of giving away 8 routers that were new, instead I gave away 10 routers that were renewed. And those went out to people across the United States, and they were a bargain. for what they do for 50 bucks, they were wonderful. They don't meet my needs, but for most people, they're running old routers. When I mean old, I mean greater than 5 years old. If your router is older than 5 years old, more than likely you would benefit from replacing it. And by benefiting, I mean it's going to have better range and better performance. 5 years ago, you may have not been using the wireless. And if you were, maybe just barely. In the last 5 years, you've probably added wireless devices and never really thought about it. You might have added a tablet or another smartphone or a garage door opener or a thermostat or security camera or a baby monitor or a Ring doorbell or that sort of thing. We're just adding so many Wi-Fi devices now that just in the course of the last few years, the average household is connecting around 12 to 15 Wi-Fi devices at a minimum. Now, the router from 5 years ago can do that, but it doesn't do it anywhere near as well as a modern router. So as long as that Netgear AX120 is available returned at 130 bucks, I think anybody not buying it is making a big, big error in judgment. Because having a router that powerful when you don't need it, at that price point, who cares? You can grow into that. Unless you have demands for Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7, but then you don't need to be taking advice from me. You already know as much or more than I do, so there's nothing I can tell you. But for average, ordinary, everyday folks who say, well, this little router's all I need, you may not know any better until you actually get a modern router and put it in and compare it. And with that AX120 here in America, buying it from Amazon Warehouse, you can return it cost-free. All you got to do is put the router, like when I return this router back to Amazon, all I have to do is put it back in this box with everything that was in this box. Everything that was in this box goes back in this box. And then I take it over to the UPS store and I give them this box just the way it is. I don't put it in another box. I don't label it or address it. I just hand it to the UPS guy at the UPS store, or I can take it to Whole Foods, or I can take it to some Kohl's stores. They have an Amazon return area. You have a QR code on your phone that Amazon emails you. You let that person behind the counter scan it. They give you a receipt. Always get your receipt. And they just take the box like this and they set it into like a big pallet of things that are going back to Amazon. That's why you don't need to rebox the box and you don't need to put a shipping label on it. It's so easy and it's free. So $130 for that route. If you can't tell, I'm just blown away by that. I just can't believe you guys didn't sell them out like minutes within when I told you about it last week. The fact they still have some, you guys are missing out. You're missing out. Because it ain't going to be that cheap for very long. Once they're sold out, then you'll just have to keep coming back and revisiting Amazon and waiting for other returns to come in. Some people won't be watching this video until next year, sometime in 2023. And they'll be like, darn, I wish I would have watched this video in December, right? Well, not much I can do about that. But I do generally like TP-Link routers. I just don't like this one for the reasons I've already detailed out. Price, those two ports that are in the way of releasing with that thing, the speed of the USB transfers on it, the lack of LED status lights, for each port and Wi-Fi, and the price. It's too expensive for what you get, and the interface, the web interface on the firmware just feels old. Doesn't feel current like Asus and Netgear. At a lower price point, that would be more acceptable, but not at this price point. No, no, no. On the other hand, if you're in the market for this kind of a router and your choice is this or spending $200 more for the Asus, that's essentially the same thing, I'd save the $200 and get the TP-Link. But I have no benefit from any of the features here, and in many cases, it's actually performing worse for me than my AX120 Netgear Nighthawk. Netgear isn't sponsoring the video. Netgear doesn't even know who I am. This is just my professional advice that I would give you if you were my customer. This is what I would tell you. Terrell Cochran said, my local UPS store started charging for boxing if you don't put it in a second box. No. If you look at the Amazon return instructions, the Amazon return instructions specifically instruct you not to put it in a box. So you're talking about a different return method, or your UPS store employee doesn't know what they're talking about. Just so you know, you should call Amazon customer service if that's the case and let them know about that UPS store, or just go to a different UPS store, unless you're confusing the type of returns. Not all returns to Amazon are free, but if you've bought with Amazon Prime and it's from Amazon Warehouse, not everything that Amazon sells comes from Amazon. And when it's coming from a third party, it may not be obvious to you. And those third parties may have their own return rules, in which case you do have to pay or you do have to put it in a second box. But the UPS stores, they actually have a big pallet. And it would actually be worse. Can I say actually again? It would actually be worse for you to put that in another box because it takes up more room on the pallet. It's going to fill the pallet sooner. They don't want that. And Amazon specifically instructs you in the return instructions. You need to read those return instructions, Terrell. They will specifically say not to put it in another box and not to label it. If it doesn't say that, then you are expected to put it in a box because you did not get it through Amazon Prime or the seller was not Amazon. So it's not a universal one-size-fits-all situation. And again, this is just Amazon in the USA. So there is either a misunderstanding you have or a misunderstanding your UPS employee has. The good news is the UPS stores are everywhere, and Amazon offers you alternatives beyond the UPS store in many cases. If there's a Whole Foods near you, a Kohl's near you, or you can always pay to ship it back on your own dime regardless. But in those cases, you would have to put it in another box and label it. So once again, your misinformation is not an exception. It's misinformation. Either you did not fully understand the instructions on your return, or the UPS employee did not fully understand the instructions. But if you read it, if you read the instructions, read every line of the Amazon return instructions. When it says not to put it in another box, you show that to the the UPS employee. And if that UPS employee is difficult, don't go back to that UPS store. It's the best advice I can give you. It's all in the instructions, and all you need to do is show those instructions where it specifies not to put it in a box. Show that to the UPS employee. If the UPS employee refuses to accept that, take your business somewhere else. It's the only thing I can tell you, Terrell. And if there's no alternative but that UPS store, then contact Amazon. Just stop your transaction. Don't pay any money. Take it back home. Reach out to Amazon customer service. That's all you can do. I have never, ever had to put anything in a box to return to Amazon if I'm taking it to the UPS store, Whole Foods, or Kohl's. Just so you know. Don Allen with a $20 Super Chat contribution. Hey, thank you, Don, so much for supporting the channel. Niles Vandesan says, I still did not hear why you think the Netgear router is better. All right, so I'll say it a third time. I've already repeated it for Gordon. I've already said it in the beginning of the video. You can rewind this video, or you can make me repeat myself. The Netgear router has a 2.2 gigahertz CPU, which is faster than the CPUs in all these other routers. The Netgear router transfers files twice as fast at 80 megabytes per second to my attached USB drive. All these other routers are doing 40 and 45 megabytes per second. The Netgear router has the exact same coverage and distance in range, rather, as all these more expensive routers at a fraction of the price. The Netgear router has all the features I need at Wi-Fi 6. Having Wi-Fi 6E does me absolutely no good whatsoever. I don't have anything to take advantage of it other than my smartphone, and my smartphone doesn't need a 6E connection. What am I doing with my smartphone that I need a 6E connection? The Netgear router is much cooler operating temperature than this router. This one's particularly warm. It's doing everything I need it to do, and I just thought by going to the 6E versions of the routers, you know, if I like the 6 that much, the 6E must be better. But the Nighthawk 6E, which looks exactly the same, by the way, on the outside, if I show you this router here, this is the 6E router. This is going back to Amazon because it actually performs slower. My USB connected speeds to my drive are half the speed. And the 2.5 I have no use for. And the 6E I can't connect anything to. So this is $450 or $400. It's a waste of money for me. So it's going back. It doesn't meet my needs. The AXE120 meets all my needs at $130. Why would I spend $400 or $500 to get features that I don't use? I can't connect to 6E with anything other than my phone. And it's got a faster processor, a 2.2 gigahertz quad-core CPU in the AXE120 that none of these other routers can compete with. And it's $130. $130 to buy that used is a steal. It is a steal. You won't find a router at that price point anywhere near as powerful or as capable. And in fact, at $500, it's only a 2 gigahertz CPU. The $130 Netgear AXE120, the returned one, 2.2. And it's doubling, that extra CPU power is doubling my USB speeds. When I transfer files from my laptop wirelessly to the attached USB drive, they're moving at 80 megabytes per second, not at the 40 and 45 I'm seeing with all these 6E routers, because they all have 1.8 or 2 gigahertz processors. Niles Vandesen says, why does the temperature in the PC not matter but a router it does? Well, it stands out, right? So normally we see this really weird technochondria with people obsessed with how hot their CPU is or how hot their computer is, which is just preposterous nonsense, all right? So I work in the field. I'm a professional in the field for over 30 years, and I've grown accustomed to how things work in general overall. Okay, so a modern router that I install and maintain, not only for myself, but for my customers, typically there's a standard process of setting them up and configuring them. And even though they vary from model to model in the little details, the overall setup is more or less the same. So that includes when I pick them up to work on them and they're plugged in, how they feel. I'm holding this one now, and I expect it to feel room temperature. That's what I'm expecting. And when I pick it up, this feels much, much hotter than room temperature. It stands out to me because it doesn't fit with what I'm accustomed to over the last, however long it's been that I've been installing routers. It's been at least 20 years. This stands out. Now, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it, and I'm not implying there's anything wrong with that. I'm simply stating that unlike any other router that I've ever worked on, this is much warmer to the touch, like much warmer. It's not a little bit warmer. It is way, way warmer than any other router I have ever laid hands on outside of an enterprise environment. And so why would I want that? Why is it so much hotter than other routers? I don't know. I'm not saying it's a problem. I'm saying it's different. And it's not different in a good way. I would very rarely say this one runs warmer, so that makes it better. It doesn't necessarily make it worse, but it definitely stands out as unusual from every other router I've ever run for consumers. I've never felt a consumer router run this hot. That's all I'm saying. For me personally, I don't think that's a good thing. I can feel the heat radiating from around it. That's really weird. Me personally, I don't like that, but that's just my personal preference. It's not affecting the performance of the router. It's not affecting really anything. It's just how I'm reacting to something that is very, very unusual and is not like any other router I've ever messed with for the consumer space. When we talk about the enterprise space, they often have cooling fans. They can be very, very loud. And of course, they're way more powerful, right? So when it comes to the consumer side, I have never felt a router run this hot. And it's just standard. That's just what it does. There's nothing wrong with it. That's just what it does. I don't like that because it's different for no apparent reason. I don't see any benefit to that. Now, if I were using 10 gigabit internet, right, and I'm processing the heck, I'm throwing just gigs of data at this thing in seconds, I could say, oh, I understand why it's hot. But I'm not doing that. It's just idle and it's hot. So it's just weird for no good reason. As far as I can tell, there's no reason this should be this hot. But it's not affecting it. It's fine. In most cases, the routers, when I pick them up, they're generally about room temperature. They might be a little tad bit warm, but they're not like this. I wonder if I can get my my heat sensor out. It's not so hot that you're going to burn yourself. It's not like that. Feels like a warm cup of coffee. The outside of a mug on a cup of coffee. It's just too hot from my preference. (113 degrees Fahrenheit). (118). So you're right around 100 and we're very close to 120 degrees, which once again, it's not going to burn you or anything, but I've never seen a consumer router run that hot, and it's just idling. It's not even doing anything. So that sticks out to me as different in a bad way when I can buy literally any other router, and unless I'm really hammering on it, it's just room temperature. So I don't know what's going on with that. All right, are there other questions, or are we going to wrap it up? We've gone a little over 2 hours here, so I do want to address your questions and your concerns, especially when people aren't getting the message I'm sending, and they tend to try and aim towards, well, you're a hypocrite. No, you're just not understanding me. So not that anybody said that, but sometimes the questions come out, it's like they're challenging me. But I'll take a moment to address any misunderstanding for sure. John Doe says a hot router might come in handy in the Northeast during winter. It very well could, but I don't think it's going to come in handy during a hot July or August day here in Phoenix when it's 117 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all I need, right? Just put this fire with the rest of the fire. Troll McTrollington says, which one of these routers is the best receiver? There's no such thing as one having a better receiver. What transmission strength your device has is really on your device. It's not on the router. So if you're having an issue with a particular device, not where it's seeing the router, but the router's not seeing it, then you have a problem with the device. You might have an older device, or something's wrong, like one of the antenna wires has come loose or come off entirely. But that would be addressed in the device itself, not in the router. Reg in the chat room says, we bought 2 of the B-Link mini PCs for a webcam teleconference for my wife's office. Yeah, you know what? These are cool little computers, and I've got another one waiting for me at Studio A to review. And I think I have another mini PC from another manufacturer. So since I did this review, now these other manufacturers of mini PCs are asking me to test theirs. And they're not paying me to test them, but they are sending me the units. So once I have those, I'll stop by Studio A tomorrow and I'll pick those up, and that'll be for more content. If not this week, then next week for sure. I'll get to them quickly. I'm very happy with this little computer. You can tell by how often I use it. Troll McTrollington says, I'm just asking because my cousin turned his Wi-Fi hub into a Wi-Fi receiver. So you're making up words here that are not industry standard, and I really don't understand what you're explaining because it's gibberish. There's no such thing as a Wi-Fi hub. There is an access point. There's no such thing as a Wi-Fi receiver. Wi-Fi works in two directions. It doesn't just receive and it doesn't just transmit. So there's nothing called a Wi-Fi receiver. There is nothing called a Wi-Fi hub. So I cannot answer your question because it doesn't make any sense. What helps is if you explain what problem you're trying to solve. So in other words, you're saying a friend did something, and my question would be, why? What was the problem your friend had that this thing you're describing resolved? And the reason I ask that is a lot of people go well out of their way, spend too much money and do an overcomplicated setup to resolve something that could have been resolved much cheaper, faster, less complicated. Sometimes, actually, most times. So when I find out what it is the end user's trying to accomplish, rather than what they did, I don't understand any of what you said. So I don't understand not only what you said, but why. It doesn't make any sense to me. But if you told me what the problem was, I could offer you a solution on how to solve it. Dan Gallagher says they used to use Ethernet hubs back in the day. That's true. In fact, I saw Ethernet hubs for sale at Fry's Electronics just a couple of years ago, and I thought, why are they still selling these? But there was never such a thing as a Wi-Fi hub. No such thing ever existed. Makin wants to know how many walls signal of this router can handle. It depends what the thickness of the walls are, what the walls are made of, what the receiving device or the Wi-Fi device on the other side, what kind of card it has, as well as how busy the network is in your area. So like if you're an apartment and everybody and surrounding apartments all have Wi-Fi routers, then there's just a lot of bandwidth and congestion and noise interference that is going to affect your ability to transmit. What the walls are made of, what's inside of the walls, and how many of those walls and what the distance is. There is no such measurement that exists that could give you that information because no two locations are identical. You would have to simply buy one and try it to see how it works in your unique environment. That's all I can tell you. I will say if you look for a router that supports a function called beamforming, then you're going to get through those walls more so than a router that does not. As to how many walls or what distance in your particular environment, giving all the variables I've just explained, that will result in answering your question. So if you were to order one of these routers or any router from Amazon here in the USA, you have up to the end of January to return that router. And the only way you will have an accurate answer to your question in your unique environment with all those unique variables is to try it for yourself. Nobody can tell you what the results will be. Nobody's got a crystal ball and nobody will know the answers to all those variables. So that is a question you will have to answer. You will have to come back and tell me. Troll McTrollington says, my cousin didn't have a Wi-Fi receiver. I don't know what a Wi-Fi receiver. What is a Wi-Fi receiver? Wi-Fi, there's no such thing. It's like saying I have a telephone receiver. Okay, so then you can just hear, you can't talk? That's not a telephone if it's unidirectional. Wi-Fi is bidirectional. There's no other type of Wi-Fi. There's no such thing as a Wi-Fi receiver. So right there, you've already lost me. Maybe it's in context of what you're saying. I have a Wi-Fi receiver like the one that grabs from the main modems and or routers So he is using an external router and converted it into a receiver. So once again, that's just gibberish. There's no such thing as a Wi-Fi receiver, so I don't know what you're talking about. If you would tell me what the problem is he was trying to solve, I could help offer a solution. But nothing you're saying makes any sense. A Wi-Fi repeater? I've never heard of a Wi-Fi repeater. There are Wi-Fi access points. There are Wi-Fi mesh points. There are USB repeaters. I've never heard of a Wi-Fi repeater. There's really no such thing as a Wi-Fi booster. That's a marketing term that doesn't really exist. So once again, we've got some terminology floating around that doesn't, you might as well just say thingamajig. That's as accurate as that is. There are Wi-Fi extenders. Are you thinking of a Wi-Fi extender? The verbiage is important because these little details matter in what we're, in providing you an answer that if you want a specific answer, the answer cannot be any more specific than the question. So if it's a vague question like that, you're going to get a vague answer. So again, if I was understanding what your cousin was trying to resolve, then I could offer you up a resolution for that. But I don't know what any of this talk is because it's just, it's not any industry term. In this context, it doesn't make sense. He says, I'm not a network technician, so I can't word myself correctly. Well, again, I encourage people to ask questions, right? I do say, if you have a question, I'll do my best to answer it. But if your question is, why is that thing blue? And you won't tell me what that thing is, and you're just giving it a made-up name, I can't answer your question. You haven't given me enough information. That's all I'm saying. So once again, I've asked you 3 times to tell me what the issue is your cousin was trying to resolve, and you have refused to answer that. So I can't go any further to answer your question. I'd love to. I am trying, but you won't tell me. So, you know, what am I going to do? A lot of people in the chat are assuming what you mean, and very few of them are agreeing. Maybe he means this, maybe he means that. That's the problem. We just don't know. Flipper Flop is saying a Wi-Fi repeater is a Wi-Fi extender or a booster. According to who? If I buy a Wi-Fi extender, there may be some marketing terms calling it a booster, but it's not an industry term. It's not an industry. I've never seen a package of a Wi-Fi device that was labeled as a repeater in my entire career. So you're making assumptions for what the person asking the question. You're making it seem like you understand what they're saying, but you're assuming he may not mean that at all. He even said, I'm not a network technician, I don't even know, right? So he doesn't even know what he means. So when we make these assumptions and we move forward with the answer, it may be a completely wrong answer because we don't accurately have the question. So once again, it would help to understand what the problem was, to understand what the best way to resolve the problem would be. Wi-Fi extenders, for the most part, for me, are a waste of money. Access points nowadays really don't make much sense when we have mesh routers available. And when the routers are so inexpensive, it doesn't make any sense to me as a technician to go through the complexity of the setup and the details of maintenance with regarding firmware updates for each individual networking device from access points. Whereas when you have a mesh system like the TP-Link Deco system, you update just the main router and it automatically updates the firmware on the satellites at the same time. So you don't have to go to each device individually and configure, maintain it. You don't have to unplug one thing because your internet went down. Now you've got to unplug 3 or 4 things. Oh, what a mess. What a mess. I just can't see doing it that way. Doman thinks he's talking about a Wi-Fi bridge. See, you all have these theories it could be talking about. You're all just guessing. Nothing on Wi-Fi is just a receiver. Anything on Wi-Fi is it transmits and receives. There's no such thing as a Wi-Fi transmitter that doesn't receive or a Wi-Fi receiver that doesn't transmit. These things don't exist. They're bidirectional only. They are not unidirectional. Even a Wi-Fi bridge sends and receives. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sending data to request what data you want to get back in return. So in most cases, like these Wi-Fi bridges still have, they don't use the master and slave term anymore, but they will use some terminology to identify one from the other, but it's not receiver or sender or receiver or transmitter. They're both receiving and transmitting. So I'm trying to remember what the term was they used, like base and something else. I can't remember. My head hurts. Yeah, that's the problem, right? I'm a big fan of keeping everything simple for this very reason. I also want to stay in business. So I'm always going to recommend the simplest answer or the simplest solution that, in my opinion, makes the most sense when we're talking expense, time of use to get it configured, reliability, and long-term maintenance. So when you set up a hodgepodge or a kludge to get something to work because it's what you got laying around the house, that's your nightmare to maintain and to diagnose when things don't work. I don't want any part of that because I want to stay in business. It's, in most cases, much easier to buy a modern router, locate it centrally in your building, put it somewhere as close to the middle as you can get it, and most modern routers at $100 or above are going to cover the entire area. So unless you live in a dwelling that's over 3,000, well, let's say over 2,500 square feet, and unless you put the router to one side of the building or the other, if it's in the middle, it should cover the entire building, including multiple floors. Unless you have a lot of network traffic from neighbors, or like I mentioned, an apartment where everybody around you is broadcasting, then you have a lot of congestion and interference. Or the materials your building is made out of. The older houses, like in the 1800s, before they had drywall, those can be very difficult walls to get through. And those houses can be very difficult to hardwire. They're just not as easy to get in there and run cables through the walls. I've had customers that have struggled trying to get signals, especially in these older houses, ever since the invention of Wi-Fi, and they've absolutely convinced themselves they just have to live with it, but it's no longer true. Like that AXE120 for $130 on that used router. I'll keep harping on it. That'll easily cover their entirety of their house. And all those dead zones they've lived with for the last 15 or 20 years, they're gone. No more Wi-Fi extenders, no more need to pair one router to another as an access point. None of that's required anymore with a modern router. And if that modern router is affordable, and you're just maintaining one device, one firmware, one thing to reboot, one thing to check when things aren't working, that means your overall experience with it will be more positive. Your downtime will be less likely because you only have the one device to fail. And configuring things to work, like port forwarding when you're going through another router, is a nightmare. So those solutions to me are very hodgepodge, band-aid, sweep it under the rug, worry about it tomorrow. This gets me through today. That's not the kind of work I do because, again, it would make me look bad and it would probably put me out of business every time the customer called me to fix it and demanded I do it under warranty. I would go out of business. So if I wouldn't do it, I wouldn't recommend you do it. Just do it once, do it right, and be done with it. Knock all that other nonsense out of here. There's no reason for that anymore, except in really bizarre circumstances. And those people usually have good money. Like if you're trying to cover 9,000 square feet, buying a $1,500 router to do it is reasonable. Chances are, if you have a 9,000 square foot building, you can afford $1,500 for the router, right? A lot of people who are saying, hey, $130 router is too much, probably live in a smaller house, probably, and their Wi-Fi needs are probably quite simple. So they don't need anything that powerful and likely wouldn't need an extender unless what they're using is more than 5 years old. But again, even TP-Link makes some routers at the $80 price point, $70, $80. That would probably be the only router they would need in that environment. Now, I'm making some generalizations here, but they're not just made up out of my imagination. You know, I do this for a living. I go to people's homes. I've been there, done that, and there are certain patterns that emerge that you can expect budget-wise and need-wise for the customer. And sometimes people are just, they have things laying around the house and they just want to use it. I've seen people do that. I've seen people say, what other slots can I fill in my computer? Why? Well, because I want them all filled. Why? Well, because it looks empty without anything in there. So they don't actually have any need. Their need's an emotional one. And that can be a little frustrating for me to say, you know, the more we add, the more complex it gets, the more difficult it gets to be to diagnose when things go wrong. Unless you have a need for something, don't just put something in there because it looks empty. That's silly. Just don't look at it. Spray paint the inside of the glass black and you won't have to look at it. But yeah, I've been there, done that. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I've gone well over my 2-hour estimated time limit here. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for today. And I don't think I'll be live tomorrow, but probably on Thursday. And maybe I'll have one of those mini PCs to test on Thursday if things go as expected. And of course, if you're watching the stream later, after it's aired live, you will see a comment section below. And if you want to ask a question in the comments section, feel free to do so, and I'll do what I can to provide you a link that can provide an answer. Thank you for watching. I will see you all again very, very soon. Also, thanks to all the Super Chat contributions, and thanks for the participation in the chat room. I appreciate all of you very much. Until next time, bye for now.